us know your thoughts on the content of this video. Do you agree or disagree? And what solutions are you implementing? When we think of gentrification, we normally think of massive displacement, replaced by a creative class who work in the interest of building up the property value of the area rather than the oppressed residents. Many of us are familiar with the newly placed architecture and spontaneous rebuilding of the community infrastructure. However, we will touch on the subtle stealth-like signs of gentrification. Some of these signs you may see on a daily basis and couldn't connect the dots until now. Most people are unaware that gentrification is taking place until it's too late. The process has begun well before the construction of the first building. It is important to note that this series will include examples of global gentrification in relation to globalization of neighborhoods. One subtle way gentrification takes place is territorial stigmatization. It may come as a surprise, but many residents who dislike gentrification and are victims of it aid in it by further encouraging territorial stigmatization. Territorial stigmatization usually plays out in 3 steps. First, the residents of an area may glorify its less than average condition. Second, the media uses this glorification to incite fear and drama for its readers and viewers. Third, councils and politicians use this to propose and greenlight plans that mirror gentrification. And lastly, the 4th step is either residents fight or flight, stick together to fight against these proposals or ensure that they benefit, or the residents do nothing, thus becoming victims to gentrification. We understand the drive and struggle it takes to make it out of the harsh inner city environments, but when we glamorize our problems, it gives developers all the more influence over local politicians to greenlight development that precedes gentrification. For example, when we use phrases like do or die Bed-Stuy, the mistake on the lake, Chirac, or Brownsville never ran, never will, these are viewed as cries for help to opportunistic investors. Furthermore, the Bronx being globally symbolized as the prototype of the urban ghetto supports the case that territorial stigmatization is global. Articles such as Javier Arreo's "This is a lot like the Bronx, isn't it?" lived experiences of marginality in an Argentine slum, and the Bronx in Australia, the metaphoric stigmatization of public housing tenants in Australian towns and cities by Christina Birdsall-Jones. While there are more, these are well-known examples that have been victims of gentrification due to, in part, territorial stigmatization. Even other countries have territorial stigmatization nicknames. Step 2. The murder further propagates these stigmas by using apocalyptic-like illusions to describe these environments. Let's take the Aylesbury estate for example. The estate is a migrant class mixed with low-income residents. The Aylesbury estate is a large housing estate located in Walworth, southeast London. In fact, by 2005, the Aylesbury estate had become a national symbol of urban blight. A symbol of British high-rise sink estates. Movies like Harry Brown and Attack the Block used the Aylesbury estate as a backdrop to portray urban decay. Southwark Council exploited the concrete modernism of its estate. Indeed, by the mid-2000s, Southwark was 3rd behind Westminster and the City of London in terms of the number of filming days they received. Even its local news station, Channel 4, used it as a logo to promote itself. This was symbolic of material dilapidation and socio-economic marginality. Southwark Council and the Aylesbury NDC did not just have to persuade the tenants that the estate was a poor place to live in, but the wider public as well. Aylesbury Tenants and Leaseholders First is a website designed to counter the negative portrayal of these estates and to counter misleading information to rally residents to ensure beneficial change. Imagine for a second if we stayed in the inner city to fix our communities rather than flee to the suburbs. The website alleges that the Aylesbury NDC funded a PR press campaign that branded them the estate from hell in the Times and the independent newspapers in 2008. The campaign costs were £24,000, a little over $29,000 in US dollars. Here are some excerpts. The tabloids did likewise. The Sunday People made the estate an emblem of the government's failure with respect to council estates. One columnist said, estates like the Aylesbury and Haygate are where the new generation of drunkies, drunks, muggers, and wreckers are growing up now. The Daily Mail said, to walk around the sprawling landscape of the Aylesbury estate is like visiting hell's waiting room. Residents glorifying poverty and crime combined with bad media press make it easier for process of gentrification to take place, as it creates a disillusioned stigma of codependency between residents and middle upper class residents. The media denigration was very useful for the NDC as it branded both the community and its residents as deviant and untrustworthy, and thus justified paternalistic treatment of them. It also stereotyped them as abnormal and needing the influence of higher income neighbors, aiding their pursuit of a newly built mixed community. Step 3. Council began to use stigmatization to their advantage. In 2008, staff in Southwark Council Regeneration Department were ferried to the nearest tube station every night after work to prevent them having to walk through Aylesbury Estate and risk being mugged. This bus service cost the council £650 per week, roughly $1,000 US dollars, and was reported in the Daily Mail, 2008. The director of regeneration in Southwark, Fred Manson, said, "We're trying to move people from a benefit dependency culture to an enterprising culture. If you have 25 to 30% of the population in need, things can still work reasonably well. But above 30%, it becomes pathological." The scheme is obvious. We are not causing gentrification, the residents are. It's what the council, media, and politicians want you to believe. The residents are glorifying their hellish environment, and only the middle upper class can justify saving this benefit-dependent culture. Although the middle upper class coming into neighborhoods will be the only ones who make gentrification profitable anyway. Despite the negative portrayal of Aylesbury, residents claimed that the buildings were sound and already a diverse community, and there was no need for mixed income. Mixed income is usually a major selling point that supporters of gentrification use to justify paying for the cost of revitalizing communities, as if investing in the residents who are already there is not good enough because they are codependent and are used to living in hell. And finally, step 4, fight or flight, fight back. Our lived experience of crime on the estate does not match the myth, and this is borne out by the statistics. We need to counter these pernicious negative stereotypes by listing and emphasizing the many positive features of our home that we now enjoy, and celebrating our diverse community. We strengthen our bargaining position. Residents contacted the newspapers and complained about the stories. I wrote back and said it's not a hellhole to live in. There's people that live here. Don't just keep telling us we live drugs, crime, prostitution, and everything around us when we haven't. That really, really angers me, said one tenant in a 2011 interview. Others could see through it. So all this banter about it being full of gun and knife-wielding gangs is all just fantasy and plays right into the hands of a council. As I said, this discourse, this system of statements behind which is some kind of clear agenda, said another tenant in a 2011 interview. In Australia, residents gathered by the thousands to petition to cancel the show Hussos. Hussos is an Australian comedy TV series, a satire parody of low-income Australian residents in fictional suburb Sunnyvale. Mount Druitt MP Richard Amery, who presented the petition in Parliament last week, said the series would deride decent people. I think it's a poor show by SBS to single out a group of decent people for a diversion, he said. What are we going to have next? A program making fun of people with disabilities or a show aimed at cultural backgrounds? It may be tongue-in-cheek, but for the 5,000 odd people in the Department of Housing Homes in Mount Druitt, it's offensive. In its very first episode, the codependency on government assistance and urban stereotype is very clear.
Hey Shazza, I reckon I've worked out a way just to get a little bit fucked up so I can get on the pension. You're fat. If I snort enough of this shit, it's gotta fuck something up. Don't you waste all my bloody bug spray. Shaz, I think I've finally done it. I think I've got a disability.
Shazza, I'm going out, right? So don't let the kids get hold of me joints again.
Where are the bloody kids?
Fuck if I know. Fuck! What the fuck did you do to your eye?
I told ya, I've been on the bug spray. This is gonna get me on the pension for sure, love. Yes? Yes, mate, yes! Kev, did you hear that? Guess who's on the disability, man? Yes, yes! Man, I'm gonna have a drink to me on the disability. I swear, I feel like I just won the grand final. Man, I'm happy. Look at this, mate. For the car so I can get the spastic spot. I got the pension card too. Hey, man. Brother, you did some fucking sick work today, mate. Normally I would say you're a dickhead, but today, fuck, you're on fire.
Look, my job's just to make sure you get what you're entitled to.
Thumbs up to you, brother. Fuck, I'm spewing. Fucking eye gets better just as I go in there. Stupid fucking eye.
Now, this is where Frankie's luck really went bad. First, the guy from Centrelink sees him having a blue with a Samoan. Yes?
Hello, what's things?
I want you to cancel the disability benefits of, well, what's his name? Frank Falzoni. Look, you won't believe what I'm seeing right at the moment.
Should we investigate him for fraud as well?
Definitely. He's trying to take us for fools.
In conclusion, ironically, we have yet to discuss massive displacement, rent gap theory, mixed income, or any of the common themes usually associated with gentrification. Yet, we have went into great detail the subtle ways that create an atmosphere for gentrification to take place. Consider this the first ingredient, the first brick, the foundation, and the engine that eventually drives gentrification to become a dominant force controlling the lives of anyone it comes into contact with. Gentrification can only exist where we are disorganized and glamorize our shortcomings. There is a thin line between neighborhood pride and glorifying poverty. Knowing the difference may save your neighborhood. Next, what are the similarities between bike lanes and gentrification? The answer may surprise you. Stay tuned. Until next time, think independently and strive for intelligence. Your future depends on it.